Okay, we should be live. What's going on, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls? DFS 5-pack, Bellman and Kostrowski. We're talking a little Saturday basketball. Game start early today, and we want to wish a best of luck from Bellman and Kostrowski over to all the listeners today. Go win the GPP. Go win some money. Let's talk about our plays of the day right after you guys click the thumbs up button, if you don't mind.
Let's get after it.
So, got ourselves a 4-gamer today. We haven't had a 4-gamer since I think last weekend, so it's kind of nice the game started early. Got a lot to talk about. If you want the full members only video or the write-up with all the top and premium plays, go grab yourself a weekly or monthly membership. You get baseball and basketball simultaneously. Subscribe to the station if you're new to it, and let's talk about cash game blocks. So kind of like every time they're on a slate, you want to attack the Washington Wizards. They're not good at defense. They play at an insanely high pace. They seem like they're almost competitive in every game too, and especially at home here, game 3. We're going to give them the benefit of the doubt and say this game is competitive. All that being said, Ben Simmons didn't need it to be competitive the last 2 games. He's balled back-to-back times. So this is a point for me where I have to stop being stubborn because I'm not a big Ben Simmons guy, but it's all about the matchup here. There are good defenses. If he was playing the Bucks, even the Clippers who haven't been able to stop Luka, the Jazz, the Lakers, somebody like that, I wouldn't like Ben Simmons as much. But Washington can't stop him. He gets into the paint at will. You've seen big assist and rebounding numbers for the first 2 games. You got Harris and Curry who are not 100%. I expect them to play today, but maybe it's another reason Simmons takes on even a little bit more of a scorer's role. But this team just can't keep him out of the paint, which is where he does his damage. Maybe he doesn't get to 50 today, but this is a guy who could take a 10-point drop in his recent production and still be a solid play top to bottom. So I expect him to be chalk here, and he should be chalk against Washington.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about is the deeper we go in the playoffs, teams being able to make it more of a half-court game, kind of shut down Simmons because he can't shoot. And that ain't Washington. That's just not them. Probably, one of, if not the worst defensive team left in the playoffs. Simmons is just still too cheap, playing well right now. This is a really good series, I think, for Philly to kind of get their feet wet, get some confidence going. I expect them to play well, albeit in a closer game. I'll give Washington the benefit of the doubt there as well. He just looks like a cog type. I mean, you're right. You don't even need the 50 he's been giving us. I still think he puts up about 50, though.
Yeah, I agree. That's kind of the way that I look at it as well. There's, styles make fights. It's a saying you hear a lot when it comes to the NBA playoffs. The Wizards got a bad draw here with Philly. Is not a good matchup for them. Philly could easily sweep this series. I'm going to give Washington the benefit of the doubt that they can pull one of the next 2 games out, but it's a bad spot. I would have given the Wizards a better shot against the Nets. I don't think they would have won either series. I just think like against the Nets, the odds of them winning a game or 2, just like they did in the regular season, would have been greater than against Philly, who's just too good defensively and has too many good perimeter defenders to lock down guys like Westbrook and Beal.
I think the ultimate upside of Brooklyn is higher than Philly, but Philly is a better team right now. They've played together for longer. They've still got, very good pieces. So I think there's more volatility with Brooklyn than Philly.
Oh, I agree. It's just not a good stop for Washington. They have no chance in the series.
Mm-hmm.
All right, next up, speaking of Philadelphia. So last night, I gave you kudos on the members only video, but here in public as well, you were really big on Jason Tatum. I didn't check his ownership, but I'm assuming it's low. He was awesome last night. And I know you're looking to beat it, not in the same way, but the same type of thing where you like him tonight in GPPs. And I do expect Embiid to get a bump down in ownership today. He went from really chalky to kind of chalky to still probably popular, but less popular today after busting the first 2 games.
Yeah, got to imagine so, especially with Jokic playing so well in a game that has a lot of appeal. Embiid is under 10K, so let's not pretend like he's going to be really, really low owned. But with 4 games in play, he's not going to be chalk or anything close to that. I like the idea of playing him, as you mentioned, with Simmons, without Simmons, kind of as a pivot. I will say I expect this game to be closer, like I mentioned, which helps Embiid. Part of the problem for him the past 2 games is he just hasn't been as needed. They've rolled. He hasn't gotten off to a great start in game 1. In game 2, they won by, 45 points. In a game that, again, I expect to be a little bit closer, this is a matchup we've seen Embiid dominate in the past, and I struggle to see this series going on, like this series ending without Embiid having at least one, if not more, monster game. We've seen 2 games so far. It hasn't happened. I like his odds tonight.
So you brought up a point a couple days ago that we've reminded people of religiously over the last couple of days is that role players Oftentimes, not always. Last night, the roles were reversed in Dallas. The Dallas role players were awful last night, and the Clippers role players actually played well. So it's not a guaranteed thing, but typically, more often than not, role players will play better in home games in the playoffs. Well, Embiid has not been needed the last two games. He got into foul trouble game one. What about a scenario today where the Wizards come out, backs against the wall, and they take a 12-point lead in the first quarter? Do you know what happens then? Embiid just gets the ball, gets the ball, gets the ball, gets the ball, gets the ball. We saw it with Dame, like in game two against the Nuggets. When a team gets down by double-digit points, very often it's the best player, which we all know is Joel Embiid for the 76ers, who starts just taking the game over.
We've seen this before, too. Like this exact scenario with what you're talking about against Washington, where Embiid has gone off. This is not a matchup that poses any threat to him at all if he decides to put his foot down. And yeah, it's funny. As far as the role players go, we've been talking about that a lot. But yesterday, Doc Rivers was asked a question about it, and he said, about how role players play better at home. It's common knowledge in the NBA. And he was like, "Well, I'm pretty sure I saw a role player play well on the road last night in Portland for Denver." He's talking about Austin Rivers, of course.
Yes. Okay. Gotcha. I was brain fart for a second. Exactly. Well, it's like nothing in life or nothing in DFS is guaranteed. You can have things that work out more often than not, but.
I was going to say, I love you kind of flipped it around. I love that point about Embiid here. I wasn't even thinking about that. Like the opposite of the role players playing better at home is that they're not going to play as good on the road, meaning you're going to need your stars more. Like I love that point. That's just another feather in the cap for him in my eyes.
Well, and then I'll add one more. His best two role players, Tobias Harris is between a role player and a star, I guess.
He's like Drew Holiday.
Yeah. Yeah, not the same game, but the same type of level, if you want to call him that. Curry and Harris they're probably going to play today, but they're not 100% either. So these are guys that can get it going from three-point range. And if those shots aren't falling, and it's halftime and Washington's up 68-52, look for Embiid just to call for the ball the entire second half.
For sure, love it.
All right, next up, let's go over to our mutual favorite play for the day. So this guy's been smooth as butter for us the first two games. Been a hard recommend each of the first two games, and he's been nothing but short of phenomenal. And that's Mike Conley. Tonight he heads back to Memphis, where he spent the first 30 years of his career, however long it was. For some reason, unbeknownst to me, he's still only 6,800. There's been a handful of players throughout the playoffs that DraftKings has had mispriced. See Kawhi Leonard, for example, and Conley's one of them. They don't know how to price guys according to the playoffs. You got Mitchell that's less than 100%. Conley is like the veteran leader of this team. And with Utah losing the first game, they ain't sitting fat and happy right now. They're going into Memphis tonight looking for the dub. Veteran presence on the road. I kind of expect him just to skate into another 40-plus game. If he gets us 50 for his third straight game, great. But I'm not calling for 50 here. I'm calling for 40, which is a very solid play on 6,800. And as much as I love Donovan Mitchell, he's still not 100%. The guy hasn't played a game in over a month.
Yeah, another game I expect to be really close. Like, these teams are – Utah's better. They're the better team, but these teams are close enough. It's just, you don't see teams.
It's not your typical 1-8.
No, it's not at all. Not even a little bit. So yeah, in another game, another series, I expect to be close. Conley is that cog in the machine. You mentioned Mitchell not being 100%. They're relying on Conley right now, going back to his old stomping grounds. It's just another thing to like about him. It's the playoffs. So you're not playing him because of that, but doesn't hurt his cause. He just looks like one of the more solid guys. Again, at a price point, I'm sure he gets love here because he's been really good, but he deserves to get love. I like him.
He's been under-owned the first two slates. I've had him at less than 20% in each of the first two slates, and it hasn't made any sense to me. And I think he'll get love today because he's done it twice in a row, but I can't imagine. Simmons is going to get more love than him.
Yeah, definitely. I'm with you. It's not like his ownership's going to jump from 20 to 60.
Right? And you still got Dame and Drew and other point guards in play. So again, I think he'll be more popular today, but I don't think he's chalk.
Agreed.
So that excites me a little bit. All right, let's move over to our favorite long shots of the day. So let's call it a spade a spade. The forward position is ugly today. Guard and center are, loaded like David Hasselhoff eating a cheeseburger on the floor. Forward, on the other hand, is ugly today. So I'm going to talk about Pat Connaughton and the Milwaukee Bucks. So big loss for Milwaukee losing Dante DiVincenzo. I get it. He's not part of the big three. He's not as valuable as Brook Lopez, but he was a really stable two-guard for us who plays excellent perimeter defense, and he's gone. So it's a big loss. Where are those minutes going to go? I anticipate, without knowing this, that Bryn Forbes will start today. He had a monster game too. I think he gets a little ownership love because of the price point. There aren't a ton of pay down guys. I think Pat Connaughton comes off the bench today and gets no love. So he does fit the true definition of a long shot. However, those 30-plus minutes a game that DiVincenzo takes on the perimeter are going to be filled mostly by P.J. Tucker, Pat Connaughton, and Bryn Forbes. With Forbes the likely starter, the other guys are going to get no love. And when it comes to DFS, I'll still take Tucker's defense in a real-life basketball game, but Pat Connaughton is a better DFS player. He's a good rebounder. He's a really good rebounder because he can jump a long way up in the air. He's a decent three-point shooter. And he's a guy that, has a steady part in the Bucks rotation at a weak position because he's a forward.
Yeah, he's far from a great DFS player, but he is definitely better than Tucker and Forbes. No doubt about that. So I'm with you. Nice long shot call here for a Bucks team you obviously know a lot about.
Yeah, the Bucks in the past couple seasons have been deeper on the number of role players they had. They're not as deep this year. The rotation is smaller, especially come the playoffs. So, if it's a blowout, Jeff Teague and guys like that will get a little bit of run. There's no guarantee it's another blowout though. So the rotation is going to be the starters, which I assume Forbes will be Pat Connaughton, Bobby Portis, and PJ Tucker. So I think Connaughton sees an extra 5 minutes today, maybe.
Yeah, I like it.
All right, next up, we're going to move over to Carmelo. So I'm going to ask you this question. Coming off of a nice game 3, I assume that Covington is the forward from the Blazers that gets more love over Carmelo. I almost called him LaMelo. Would you assume that to be true as well?
Yeah, for sure. I think Covington is definitely the more popular of the two.
So then I think tell yourself a story, guys, on who it is that you want to play. It's not crazy. They both could succeed. But if you want to tell yourself a story that Portland needs offense, well, Carmelo he's much more of a shot maker than Robert Covington. I don't think there's any question about that. And while they're few and far between compared to what they were 10 years ago, we saw some flashes of Carmelo in the right spots this year, regain some of that elite offensive player for shorter stretches. And let's just say Denver gets a lead in this one, and maybe Dame's shot isn't falling like normal. I could see Melo having one of those 6-minute stretches where he scores 15 real life points.
Yeah, same. He kind of did that in the second half last time out. He had 3 DK points going into the second half, finished with 21 or 22. Rock solid second half, and I like that, positive momentum carrying over to today. Far from a lock, that's why he's a long shot. But yeah, I don't think it's crazy to think Portland needs scoring against this Denver team. Portland's not very good at defense, so they're going to need to put the ball in the hoop. And at 4,100, we talked about it. There aren't a ton of spend down guys. Ford is very weak. He works for me as, again, a long shot, a guy I'm aware could easily get 15 DK points if the game flow is not working in his favor. But if it is, he's got 30-plus upside.
For sure. So this is also one of those plays. I remember earlier in the season reviewed a couple of GPP winning lineups, and one of the things we talked about with the NBA is you don't need to abandon the chalk. In baseball, a lot of times we'll talk about just going with the contrarian stack because good plays in baseball fail at a very high rate. In basketball, you could run a chalkier lineup today with Ben Simmons, whoever else you think is going to be popular. And by just switching from Rocco to Melo, one little change like that, and Melo has a big day and Rocco has another, 12 point or whatever. That's all the changes you need to make off of a chalkier lineup in basketball.
You want chalk guys in the NBA. You don't want every single guy to be the chalkiest on the slate, but you want chalk guys and you want to pick your spots to fade them.
Absolutely. It doesn't take a lot of contrarian type of plays to be different.
I was thinking about this last night because I'm always thinking about this. Baseball, in the NBA, guys at different price points, a guy that's 5K and a guy that's 10K, those guys are usually in different scoring tiers. The guy that's 10K is hardly ever going to get outscored by the guy that's 5K. It will happen, but very rarely. In baseball, that's not even Joe Panic had 29 DK points yesterday. You know what I mean? He was 2,500.
And what does Vlad have?
5. So
outscored him by 6 times in less than half his price.
It does not happen in the NBA.
Bryn Forbes could have a great game today, but he's not outscoring Giannis.
Right. Not even, he's not coming, exactly. And then the MLB, we Panic 6 times Vlad, exactly.
Right? It's just a different sport. And especially when you get into a shorter slate like this, where the obvious teams to pick on, like you're just not going to have great
You're doing
success in the postseason trying to pick on the Lakers on a nightly basis because it's slow, it's methodical, and it's good defense. However, you can pick on Washington every day. And that's why Simmons, Harris, Embiid, Curry, whoever's in play, like they usually succeed.
Yeah, the NBA, and again, I'm about as contrarian as they get. You're doing it wrong if you're not playing chalky guys. I mean, you have to play chalky guys, like even in the regular season, especially in the playoffs, and then you find your spots to be different. You know, there's maybe a guy or two that's getting a lot of love that you don't think should, like Covington or whoever it is. But yeah, I'm with you 100% on all that.
Just to go back to the Pat Connaughton point, like first game of the day, which is big for this one. People are going to be looking at the starters. I anticipate Bryn Forbes as a starter. It doesn't mean he is. It could be PJ Tucker. It could be Pat Connaughton. We don't know. But as soon as Forbes enters the starting lineup, his ownership percentage skyrockets compared to where Pat Connaughton is. We saw it last night. I wrote it in the write-up. Like, I anticipate Taj Gibson starting today, and that was hours before it came out because I just kind of figured he would roll with what he did in the second half. But as you watch that game last night, the reason Nerlens Noel was better than Taj is now he was battling with the Hawks' second unit, while Taj had to, try to keep up with Clint Capella, who's just a much better center. So, like, sometimes it's nice to zig when other people zag.
Yeah, exactly. But you just got to pick your spots. Like Taj Gibson was a great one last night to get away from if you had that reasoning. Like I did not. I used him, but
So I used him
if
in
you
all three
had,
lineups.
yeah. But that's again, you want to have that with every single popular player on the slate. But a guy like Taj Gibson, who we know like is very rarely going to ruin the slate. I mean, I wish I thought of that yesterday.
Yeah, and again, I played Taj in my lineups. I liked
But
Taj
he's the
yesterday.
thing with like it's easy to say now, but I mean, you know, it's not like we expected like 30 from him. I just wanted to run 20, and he still could have got there with the starters. It just didn't happen. I don't
Yeah.
know. I still think it was a fine play on paper.
Yeah, I don't know how much of that game you watched. I watched the full thing. And we all know Taj Gibson is no Klay Thompson. But dude missed about 5 shots within about 4 feet that just like circled the rim and bounced out. So there are a lot of scenarios where he scores better. But Noel got to go up against the bench guys, and he was really good despite that bum ankle.
Yeah, so that's all it is.
All right, good luck today, and talk about baseball later.
Thanks.